Thank you so much, Yvonne, for the opportunity, and good afternoon, distinguished colleagues. And thank you so much for the informative sessions that we have had earlier. I enjoyed so much because I'm coming from a policy background, and you have been presenting interesting projects that we from the Global South would actually look into and learn from so that we can also transform our communities sustainably. My name is Clemence Tondoi, and I'm connecting from South Africa. I'm a PhD candidate at Stellenbosch University in South Africa, but I'm originally from Zimbabwe. And today I'm honored to be part of this wonderful conference where we get to discuss issues around sustainability. And I'm delighted that I had an opportunity to collaborate with Prof. Sigurdsson on a research project that we did in Zimbabwe, which is still ongoing, and we are here to share insights on the developmental implications of lithium mining in resource-rich countries, with a specific attention on Zimbabwe. And the reason why Zimbabwean case is very important is because of its location and its also deposits of critical minerals in Zimbabwe that are needed at the global level. It's so for me to start, I'll just give a background. As many of you know, that critical minerals have become the center of the global agenda, and it has raised so many questions, especially between the upstream, midstream, and downstream on issues of sustainable development. We've seen that even as critical minerals are bringing new opportunities for sustainable development, it raises also pressing questions about governance and justice, and also sustainable development in the countries where these resource-rich minerals are being mined. And in our presentation today, I will be able to walk you through some of the findings from the synthesis of 31 articles which presented also 31 cases from diverse regions in Zimbabwe where lithium mines are located, and the power, socio-economic, political issues that are arising from that. And from these findings, we'll discuss the implications on Zimbabwe's development agenda, and these implications also apply to so many other resource-rich countries, specifically from the global south. Just to give more information on the background, which informs this study, I'll start by just giving an overview of what it looks like at the global level. And in 2021, international energy agents projected a demand of critical minerals to quadruple in 2040, and the lithium demand is expected to also, specifically lithium, is expected to increase by 42 times as of from 2020 up to 2040. And in 2022, supporting that, the benchmark mineral intelligence estimated that more than 300 new mines needs to open by 2035 to meet this increasing demand. And by 2050, the World Bank says we need 3 billion tons of critical minerals for us to be able to achieve the decarbonization agenda. Bringing attention to Africa, even though we see an opportunity in Africa, there's also a huge risk that comes with this sustainable transition, because there's general lack of justice in the manner in which it is conducted. Countries like Zambia, Ghana, Mali, and Zimbabwe, to mention just a few, are being integrated into this global rush for lithium. And their integration, some of them are integrated into this global rush for critical minerals prematurely before they develop their decarbonization targets. Some of them are integrated into the decarbonization agenda without national policies and targets. And yet, studies by Sovaco in 2019 and Brana in 2020 remind us that these resource-rich countries downstream often experience pollution. Sometimes we have issues of human rights violations, and there's entrenched inequalities that exist within the countries. In most cases, the benefits from the extraction of critical minerals that are being exported to another countries on always, in most cases, benefit these multinational corporations rather than the local communities that are around the areas where these critical minerals are being extracted. And this has prompted a regional call from the African Union and African Development Bank for justice-centered policies that prioritize local benefit sharing and also the social ecological safeguards for Africa. Now bringing it all together at a local level, mining in Zimbabwe is central to our development agenda, and it contributes 12 to 15% of our GDP, 60% of our foreign earnings, foreign currency earnings, and also 50% of our foreign direct investment comes from mining industry. Mining is so critical because it employs 45,000 people in large scale and 500,000 more in small scale mining. And why Zimbabwean case is so important is because Zimbabwe holds the largest lithium reserves in Africa and it ranks sixth in the world. And experts estimate that even currently, as Zimbabwe is contributing to 10% lithium supply globally, there's a potential that by if we tap into the deposits, lithium deposits across the country, we might be able to supply over 20% of lithium demand across the world. And yet, key problems remains, which includes poor governance as a result of authoritarian regimes, and this always leads to corruption, persistent inequalities, and the climate change agenda that we are trying to push is actually being reversed in countries like Zimbabwe, where we have critical minerals and where the government brings the national development agenda to gain much revenue, quick wins, without looking at the longer term implications of what we are doing. So these highlights set the stage for a deeper analysis on how these critical minerals, especially the agency and the rush that comes with it, intersects with governance, intersects with justice, intersects with the general development in Zimbabwe. So the objectives of our review was specifically to critically examine the uh, developmental implications of emerging lithium industry in Zimbabwe, and also look at uh, how this rapid expansion of lithium extraction and investment influences Zimbabwe's economic growth, social structures, and environmental stability. And lastly, also to look at whether lithium boom represents a genuine pathway to inclusive development or and sustainable development, or it risks repeating the familiar dynamics of a resource case that we have in Africa. How this research how this research was conducted. Um, it was a review. When we did the literature review, what we found is that between 2023 to 2025, there's been increased publications of scholarly publications on the increased need of critical minerals from Zimbabwe, specifically lithium. But what was striking is that despite this increasing interest from different scholars who looked at it from a social perspective, environmental, and governance impacts of critical minerals, the studies remain fragmented into different disciplines, into different cases, into different contexts, and uh, this scattered literature makes it so difficult because some contexts are totally different from another, but within the same country. So we thought a holistic view of how the developmental implications of critical minerals extraction, such as lithium, would help by bringing, if we, by bringing these fragmented pieces of literature from a different disciplines, some development, some political ecology, some political economy perspective, we were able to come up with an interdisciplinary way of looking at development and implications of lithium mining in Zimbabwe. So to address this, we adopted a qualitative approach using the integrative literature review, and we grounded our study in the transitional justice theory, where and the advantages of this literature review, because we wanted to achieve two aims. The first is to we have an interdisciplinary findings of the implications of lithium mining in Zimbabwe. Uh, and the second one is to so that we can be able to push and drive policy advocacy to come up with a national strategy for policy for lithium mining, so that it's not just done um, haphazardly, but it is rule-based. Then the second thing was also to inform the research agenda. The increasing desire by different scholars to look at lithium mining in Zimbabwe showed us that there's so much literature that's out there that is disjointed, but I mean there's still more to be done to be understood. So we decided to bring together the findings to identify gaps to inform future studies. So, from this review, we found 31 interesting cases across the seven mining regions in Zimbabwe, and the synthesis produced six recurring themes. And I will be presenting on these themes in depth. And these themes include governance and political economy, climate justice, dependency and developmental choices, displacement and resettlement, social justice and gender. And lastly, we noted the global and local inequalities that exist in these extractive industries. I'll start by looking at lithium governance and the political economy in Zimbabwe. I mean, we did an extensive review of a number of articles that addresses issue of governance, and consistently literature was pointing to the fact that there's governance fragility, and as points to governance fragility as a major obstacle that is hindering us to achieve, I mean, the desired wealth from lithium extraction in Zimbabwe. A number of scholars looked at different issues, but all bringing them all together, they review a pattern of elite capture and of the lithium rains, weak accountability, and governance fragility. Um, the government has pushed so hard to indigenize lithium extraction, but again, in as much as these indigenous policies are framed as empowerment strategies, they often reproduce vulnerabilities, while we see existing, I mean, remnants of the colonial legislation still controlling, for example, our mining sector. For example, we are still the mining sector is still run under the legislation that was done during the colonial era. We've tried to enact a new piece of legislation, but it has been dragging for years. So we see these colonial legacies shaping again how our resources are being extracted, and the development that comes out of it, which is still fragmented and produces inequalities. And the implication for that is clear, that without transparent institution and accountable governance, lithium boom that we are witnessing now risk to reinforce the existing inequalities between the rich and the poor, the connected and those who are not connected, and also in most cases, these authoritarian regimes are the ones who end up getting away with it at the expense of the indigenous communities who find themselves in the communities where these critical minerals are located. Now, moving to the second theme, which is displacement and livelihoods impact as a result of lithium mining in Zimbabwe. Again, evidence shows that mining-induced displacement has become the norm, and it is so widespread, especially in Zimbabwe, because we have dual legal systems where in the rural communities, in most cases where these minerals are found, people live under customary law. And in the urban cities, you find people having legal, I mean, statutory approaches to law. When the mines are going to the communities where people have customary law, which is not written down, which they don't have anything to prove that they own the piece of land. Their land is, in most cases, according to the findings, taken without compensation, without consultation. And a number of organizations, especially civil society organizations, have reported the huge numbers of people who are being impacted by displacement in Zimbabwe as a result of lithium mining. Um, I might not go in detail. We have so many cases that we found from these findings. But taken together, what we see from those cases, we see that displacement produces precarity, and compensation schemes across the board have not been adequate, and sometimes lives are disrupted, and where they are resettled, they don't have their ways of livelihood. It's generally their livelihoods are disrupted, and the resettlement communities always face uncertainty because they can be moved from one area, and when the mineral is discovered in the new area they have been sent to, again they are being forced to move. Again, we have seen implications on food security. And the implication, again, of that is that uh, economic growth is stifled, and also there's also erosion of social and livelihood foundations, especially for the rural population. Moving on to climate
Ray,
justice.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to give you a head up of the time.
Okay.
Can you make sure to finish in about 3 to 4 minutes?
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Moving on to climate justice, what we have seen from different reviews that we did um, is that climate justice is just a paradox, especially for indigenous communities. In most cases, where we find these deposits, lithium enables in as much as lithium enables global decarbonization, it reproduces injustice, especially at local level. Our governments at high level are pushing for short-term extraction to be able to get the revenues that they require to stay politically relevant, but at a bigger scale, this short-term supply are reshaping local territories in ways that marginalize these communities. And therefore, without justice-centered frameworks, Zimbabwe's lithium boom risks to become another chapter of extractivism rather than a pathway for equitable distribution. Or finally, I will talk about the global and local dynamics. Um, as I highlighted that Zimbabwe is sixth globally, it is deeply embedded in the global supply chains, and this entanglement is shaping the local territories by producing new inequalities. Um, Zimbabwe is receiving pressure left, right, and center, especially from the Chinese, through the different kind of contracts that we are engaged in to extract these critical minerals. In February, Zimbabwe government decided to ban lithium exports, but again, because of this existence of to focus on local development and local beneficiation, but the problem still exists. The governance issue is the problem because there's no legal framework or policy framework to help in the governance of those critical minerals. And reports from media have been highlighting that even though the ban has been implemented, but still corruption and other things are still existent. So, in conclusion, the evidence across all these themes, governance, displacement, climate justice, these global local dynamics converge into informing us one reality that the global lithium rush does not automatically bring positive developmental advantages, especially for the resource-rich countries like Zimbabwe. Instead, it risks inequality, dependence, unless and environmental injustice, unless the policies that are implemented and unless the policies and legal framework is implemented. And the pathway for development for resource-rich countries like Zimbabwe is for them to prioritize transparency governance at a local level, livelihood restoration, and also value addition and beneficiation at local level, which requires huge amounts of investments and partnerships with other key players. We have been partnering with Chinese multinational corporations, and we are from 2027, they're going to develop the lithium processing unit in Zimbabwe, which is going to be a game changer in terms of development. So, from all these findings, what keeps recurring is the need for legal and institutional frameworks that must effectively be not only enacted but implemented to ensure that the mining sector is rule-based. And there's also need for political will encourage, like what Madam President said earlier, to uphold transparency, especially from our leaders, transparency and accountability. And this can be done by ethics training. Where in a debate a few weeks ago, when we're talking about ethical leadership, because I'm in the school of public leadership, and people were debating, can ethics be trained? And we argued that our leaders need to be trained ethics. Them taking them or not is another issue that we can look at, but ethics training for public servants is so critical. And again, as I highlighted, indigenization policies should not be used, especially by revolutionary and authoritarian governance. This can be used to justify them looting and also engaging in corruption. These indigenization policies should translate into inclusive development, especially taking into consideration the marginalized communities. And lastly, I would say there's need for environmental safeguards to mitigate degradation and ensure long-term resilience. And this can be done by adopting legislation. We have quite strong legislation and institutions in Zimbabwe, but again, the problem comes from enforcement and just the general lack of political will, because some of the heavy power weights are involved in the movement of these critical minerals externally without benefiting. So, just to close, we concluded that the current extractivism wave is yet another is sorry is yet another extractivism, neo-colonial extractivism, and what we need is to advocate for policy implementation more at local level, but again to drive continuous research, now looking at the best ways of implementing policy. And one key issue came that as this is a reproduction of neo-colonial extractivism, we need to look at it from a decolonial perspective. The drive towards African sovereignty, the drive towards uh, value addition and beneficiation, the benefits should be enjoyed by the Africans, so that we don't export the resources and inherit the problems ourselves downstream. I think there's need again for South to South cooperation, which we have seen taking place over the years. Thank you so much. Let me yield now and ask for questions and contributions. Thank you.